Hello, I'm Matt Galloway, and this is The Current Podcast. Have you ever been eye to eye with a great white shark? Andrew Jones has.
Oh my goodness, look, he just bit us. Wow.
The teacher from Grand Manan, New Brunswick, was out fishing in the Bay of Fundy last summer when a great white started circling his boat.
It was huge, and that dorsal fin, and it circled our boat. Maybe 6 or 7 times. Each time the shark would come around the boat, you would look it right in the eye. It was so close, but we had eye contact several times. Well, I wasn't scared, and maybe I'm not smart enough to be scared, but my crew, and he told me 3 times that it was time to go. We better get moving.
Maybe I'm not smart enough to be scared. There is evidence that there is a growing number of great white sharks on Canada's east coast, so much so that there's a plan in Nova Scotia to put warning signs up at the beaches. Fred Wariski is Executive Director of the Ocean Tracking Network at Dalhousie University in Halifax, also working with the Life Saving Society of Nova Scotia to determine which beaches need those signs. Fred, good morning.
Good morning.
You heard Andrew there. He had a moment, eye contact with that great white shark. Why are there more great white sharks off the east coast of this country?
The population of whites was originally depressed, probably due to fishing mortalities, and it wasn't because they were being fished themselves, but because they got caught as bycatch in other fisheries. So by the 1960s, they were looking at pretty much like an endangered species, and conservation measures were put into place. The populations have begun to resurge in the last 20 years or so, and now we're seeing the fruits of that recovery.
Do we know, from a numbers perspective, how many more great whites there would be in Canadian waters?
The only estimate we have for the Northwest Atlantic comes from some fantastic work done by the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy and the State of Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries that managed to get an estimate of how many of these animals were cruising Cape Cod and came up with about 800 figure. They're now working on trying to extend that to the whole Northwest Atlantic, which would include our Canadian population. Our sharks don't stay here all year. They migrate up for the summer feeding season, and they turn around and go back somewhere warm for the winter.
We heard Andrew Jones there, and the person that he was in the boat with saying, we better get out of here. It's time to get a move on. You could imagine that people want to do that because of the danger of these sharks. There have been reports in Nova Scotia of 2 shark attacks in recent years. One injured a woman who was out swimming in 2021. Another killed a dog last year. So how much of a risk do these sharks pose to humans and to dogs?
So these are big, powerful animals. Think things like bears and cougars and coyotes in our wild terrestrial environment. And you want to treat them with respect. You also remember the fact that we are guests in the ocean, whereas that's home for them. And so they kind of rule out there. At this point, the sharks are really not considered to be that big a danger. Part of it is because their numbers are still pretty low, and part of it is because we're not a preferred prey item. If we were, then you would see a whole lot more mortalities due to shark attacks than we are actually seeing, and typically it's been about 10 to 20 globally, worldwide, due to that, and you compare that to the hundreds of thousands of people that are killed by mosquitoes because of the mosquito-borne diseases that are out there, kind of puts things in perspective.
And yet, I mean, Jaws looms large in the minds of many people. Why might a shark attack a human being?
We think that part of the game right now is that as this population is recovering, we're picking up a lot of what are called subadults and juvenile sharks. There's a big change that occurs in the white sharks when they move from being a juvenile that's feeding on fish to something that moves over to a larger size range of prey, taking seals. Their teeth actually change from things that are more like needles that are pointy for spearing fish into something that's triangular and serrated that is great for kind of like a steak knife for cutting into a larger prey item. And in that phase where they're making the transition, when they're learning what a seal is and how to go hunt a seal, they begin experimenting. And we think that some of the high risk comes from the fact that our populations right now are dominated by those juveniles in that range where they're going to be experimenting.
Where are you looking at putting these warning signs?
Well, we're working with groups like the Life Saving Society, which you mentioned, and municipalities here. We don't, as an academic institution, consider ourselves the right group to determine what is best for public safety. That is really the experience and the competencies of the municipalities and things like the lifeguards. And so what we're going to do is support them, and they'll make the decisions about where the signs are going to go, which beaches, where, when, and we're going to provide material to them.
What would be on the signs, wherever they happen to be?
So if you go back to the ontogeny of the signs, they started in Cape Cod, where a offshoot of the Sable Island gray seal population colonized Chatham area on the Cape, and then that population built to 14,000 in the roughly about 2000, and at that point the sharks came into a heavily used touristic area called Cape Cod, and you began to have interactions with people, including one fatal attack. So at that point, the municipalities on the Cape began putting up, in some cases, some very aggressive signs to warn people that there's a danger here and you should be cautious, and here are measures that you can take to do that. But if you move away from the Cape to other areas where sharks occur, but they don't have the same risk because we have not had the fatalities, the signs are more signs about beach safety. So they'll talk about rip tide and currents and things like that, but also sharks a little bit.
So on these signs, as I understand it, there's just going to be a QR code that's going to direct people to more information, right?
So the plan right now, at least what we've been discussing, is to put out the daily sign that the lifeguards put out on the beaches and take back with them at night. There has been a sign survival issue in some places. For example, as the price of lumber goes up to $125 per plywood sheet, a plywood sign makes a great shed for somebody if nobody's looking when you serve yourself at night. So by having these kind of temporary small signs out there, the best solution is to just have a QR code there, and you scan it, and it'll take you to the Life Saving Services safety page, and there will be information about beach safety generally.
And that's going to give people more information than an image of, the giant shark with, what did you say, the steak knife teeth?
Yes, steak knife, serrated.
Sure. But you think that the QR code would be enough?
It's going to be a start. Really, this game is about getting information out to the public and just let them know that the ocean is changing. We're seeing the return of something that used to be here now. We got a lot more people doing a lot more things like kayaking and paddleboarding, and many, many more surfers than we had back when the populations were historically large. So we're moving into a new time and a new series of interactions. We just want people to be aware, and there are things you can do to manage your risk.
So we just have a minute or so left. I mean, you have a heat wave that is in Nova Scotia over the next few days. These beaches are some of my favorite places in this entire country. You could imagine that somebody might be scared to go for a swim or a surf off the Atlantic right now. What would you say to them?
Yeah, I go every day to Crystal Crescent Beach during the summer. So I'm managing my risk by not swimming at dawn and dusk, and I don't hang around with the seals.
Don't hang around with the seals.
Right.
Keep your distance from the buffet, I suppose. Fred, good to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Fred Worski is Executive Director of the Ocean Tracking Network at Dalhousie University in Halifax.